7 men walked into the bar on a Tuesday night. Same booth in the back, same order. 1 bottle, 8 glasses, though there were only 7 of them. Olivia had seen groups like this before. She knew what they were the moment they walked in. She knew what the empty glass meant. The team leader told her, quietly, "Table for 7. She nodded. She set the table herself, and when she finished, there were 8 place settings, not 7, 8. The team leader stood up slowly. His voice was tight. "Why did you set 8? The whole table went silent. 7 hardened men staring at a waitress who had just touched something sacred she had no way of understanding. Olivia looked at the empty chair. Then she said 6 words, quietly, that none of them were ready for. "Because Danny doesn't like sitting alone." The team leader's face went white. Nobody at that table had said Danny's name out loud. "Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and subscribe if you believe the quietest people often carry the deepest stories." Tuesday nights were usually slow at Miller's Bar and Grill. By 8, the dinner rush had passed. Old country music played, and only a few regulars remained. Olivia Hart moved between tables without wasting a step. She refilled coffee before customers asked, remembered which widower preferred the corner booth, and knew when silence was kinder than conversation. To most people, she was simply the blonde waitress with tired blue eyes and a careful left arm. That was how Olivia wanted to be known. She had spent 2 years building a life small enough to manage. But before that shift ended, the secret she had protected for 3 years would walk through the front door. There had been a time when Olivia measured nights by radio calls, gunfire, and the bandages left in a field kit. Now she measured them by table numbers and closing checks. She never told customers she had served as a Navy combat medic. She did not mention joint operations, months overseas, or the pale scar beneath her left sleeve. When someone asked why she favored that arm, she blamed an old accident. Ordinary people accepted ordinary explanations. That was why she chose this place, 3 states from the base where her military records ended. Nobody here saw a medic who had failed to bring 1 man home. Nobody knew that every year, on one particular Tuesday, she went home, placed an empty glass beside her dinner plate, and sat across from a chair no one else could see. That Tuesday had returned. Olivia knew it when she opened her eyes. The date waited on her phone, though she needed no reminder. She moved through the day with her hands occupied and her thoughts locked away. At 4, she tied on her apron. At 6, she served an elderly couple celebrating 43 years of marriage. At 7:30, she brought pie to a truck driver who had learned he would be a grandfather. She smiled, but part of her listened for a voice that existed only in memory. At 8:17, she glanced toward the empty stool at the bar. 3 years earlier, at almost that exact minute, a wounded man had asked her a question she still heard whenever the room grew quiet. Olivia turned away before the memory could finish it. The front door opened at 8:23. 7 men entered without the usual noise of a large group. The first, broad-shouldered and close to 50, paused to study the room. His eyes found the exits, the hallway, and the dark windows facing the parking lot. The others did the same without appearing to follow him. Olivia recognized the habit. She noticed their straight backs, and the way 2 younger men positioned themselves where they could see the door. They wore jeans, work jackets, and plain shirts, but none disguised what years of service had placed in their movements. These were not 7 friends meeting for drinks. They were a team entering a room together, even if the uniforms were gone. The leader approached the hostess stand. "Table for 7, he said. His voice was polite, but something in it sounded held together. The hostess reached for 7 menus and started toward a row of tables near the windows. "The back booth, if that's all right," he added. She changed direction without questioning him. The booth was the largest in the restaurant, tucked beneath a framed photograph of the harbor, with a clear view of the entrance. Olivia watched the men take their places. Nobody claimed the chair at the open end. 1 man rested both hands on the table and stared at the wood. Another removed his baseball cap and turned it slowly between his fingers. The youngest could not have been more than 30, yet grief had settled into his face in a way that made him appear older. No one smiled. No one reached for the menus. And when Olivia approached with her order pad, every man looked toward the empty chair before looking at her. The leader introduced himself only as Ray. The others did not offer names. 1 bottle of bourbon, he said. Olivia wrote it down. Anything to eat? She asked. Ray looked around the table. We will. Give us a few minutes. Then his eyes returned to the empty end of the booth. And bring 8 glasses. Olivia's pencil stopped. It was only for a heartbeat, but Ray noticed. His gaze lifted to her face. Olivia nodded once and finished writing, as though nothing had happened. She had served military reunions before. She knew the meaning of a drink poured for someone who would not arrive. But the 8th glass changed something. As she walked toward the bar, she heard one of the men say, 3 years shouldn't feel like yesterday. Another answered, it does tonight. Olivia kept walking, but the locked door inside her had begun to open. She carried the bourbon and 8 glasses back on a round tray. 7 glasses went before the 7 men. The last she placed at the empty chair. Nobody thanked her until Ray gave a quiet nod. Olivia turned to leave, then heard the youngest man speak. He would have hated this place. A man beside him almost smiled. No, he would have complained about the music and eaten half the menu. Ray said something too softly for Olivia to catch, but another voice answered. That was before the Eastern Ridge. Olivia's hand tightened around the tray. She knew that ridge. She knew the date. She knew why 7 men had driven 3 states to sit together beneath a harbor photograph. Most of all, she knew the man missing from their table, yet none of them recognized her, because she had never belonged to their unit. She had only belonged to the final 40 minutes they had spent 3 years trying to understand. Olivia could have delivered the bottle and protected the life she had built. Instead, she went to the service station and gathered a clean napkin, a dinner plate, and silverware. Then she returned to the booth and quietly completed the empty place. She straightened the knife beside the plate and positioned the untouched glass above it, exactly as she had done at home every anniversary. The 7 men watched her hands. When she finished, there were 8 complete settings around the table. Not 7 men and an extra glass, but a place waiting for someone. The youngest man's expression hardened. 2 others exchanged unsettled looks. Olivia stepped back, suddenly aware that her private act of respect looked like an intrusion. Chief Ray Coleman stared at the 8th setting, then slowly pushed his chair away from the table. The legs scraped across the floor, cutting through every conversation in the bar. He stood, grief sharpening into anger, and fixed his eyes on Olivia. Why? He asked, his voice beginning to break. Did you set 8? Why did you set 8? Ray asked again. His voice was low, but the room had become quiet enough for everyone nearby to hear it. Olivia looked from his face to the complete place setting at the empty chair. She understood immediately what the 7 men saw. A waitress they had never met had taken their private tribute and turned it into something visible, almost ceremonial. From where Ray stood, she had crossed a line without permission. Olivia had spent years learning when to step back, before a situation became worse. She could remove the plate, offer a quick apology, and return to the safety of the bar. Her hand moved toward the silverware. Then she saw Ray's fingers gripping the edge of the table. He was not angry because the place meant nothing. He was angry because it meant everything, and Olivia knew that if she cleared it now, she would be taking Danny away from the table a second time. "Chief," one of the older men said, trying to soften the moment. Ray did not look at him. His eyes remained on Olivia. "We asked for 7 seats and 8 glasses," he said. "Not 8 dinner settings." Olivia nodded. "I know." The youngest man pushed his chair back. He had been introduced only as Luke, though no one had spoken his last name. "Then why do it?" he demanded. "You think this is some kind of birthday toast?" His anger arrived faster than Ray's, sharp enough to make 2 customers at the bar turn around. People see a group of veterans and decide they understand. They buy a drink, say thank you for your service, and go home feeling good about themselves. Luke pointed toward the empty chair. "That place isn't decoration." Olivia felt the old scar beneath her sleeve tighten as her shoulder drew inward. She had heard pain disguise itself as anger many times. Knowing what it was did not make the words hurt less. Ray lifted one hand, and Luke fell silent. But the damage had been done. Olivia could feel every eye at the table measuring her. She reached for the plate again. "I'm sorry," she said. The safe answer was ready. She could tell them she had misunderstood the order. She could blame the extra setting on habit and let them believe she was only an overeager waitress. For 2 years, small lies like that had protected the life she built. Nobody here knew about the blood she had washed from her hands in a transport aircraft, or the uniform folded inside a box beneath her bed. Nobody knew why that date lived in her bones. Olivia lifted the plate half an inch. Then the untouched bourbon glass caught the yellow light. For 1 second, she saw another metal cup beneath a white sky, and heard a weak voice trying to joke between shallow breaths. She lowered the plate back onto the table. Olivia looked at the empty chair. "Because Danny doesn't like sitting alone." 6 quiet words. Nothing more. Yet they struck the table harder than a shout. Ray's face lost all color. Luke's anger vanished so quickly that his mouth remained open without sound. One of the men dropped the bottle cap he had been turning between his fingers, and the small piece of metal rolled across the table before falling to the floor. Nobody bent to retrieve it. The old country song continued from the jukebox, but the bar itself seemed to stop around them. Ray lowered himself into his chair, as if his knees would no longer hold him. "What did you say?" he whispered. Olivia did not repeat it. She watched recognition move through 7 faces, not recognition of her, but of a sentence Danny had used so often that every man at the table knew it belonged to him. Luke stood again, but now confusion had replaced anger. "Who told you his name?" he asked. Olivia met his eyes. "No one tonight." "Then you looked us up." "I didn't. You heard somebody talking." Ray finally turned toward Luke. Nobody said Danny. The words ended the argument. Since entering the bar, they had called him he, brother, and once the missing fool. His name had remained protected, held back until the bottle was opened and the first toast began. Ray studied Olivia with the caution of a man whose grief had just been touched by something he could not explain. "Daniel Alvarez," he said slowly. "That's who this place is for. He died 3 years ago, more than 1,000 miles from here. So I'm going to ask you once more. How do you know his name? If you believe we should never judge someone by the uniform they wear today, write 'never judge' in the comments." Olivia drew a breath, but the air seemed to stop at the back of her throat. She had imagined this moment in different forms. Sometimes Danny's mother found her. Sometimes an investigator called. Sometimes one of his teammates appeared at the bar and recognized her before she could decide whether she wanted to be found. Never had she imagined 7 men sitting before her on the anniversary, with Danny's glass waiting between them. "I knew him," she said. Luke shook his head. "From where?" Olivia glanced toward the other tables. The manager stood near the kitchen doorway, uncertain whether he should intervene. A regular named Frank watched from the bar with his coffee raised halfway to his mouth. Olivia had worked beside these people for 2 years without giving them a reason to ask who she had been. One honest sentence would end that privacy. She could still walk away. Then Ray quietly said, "Please." The anger was gone from his voice. What remained was worse. Hope. "I was there," Olivia said. Ray's brow tightened. "At the Eastern Ridge?" She nodded. Luke looked her up and down, seeing the blue waitress uniform and white apron as if they made the answer impossible. "There were no civilian workers at that position." "I wasn't a civilian." Olivia's voice became steadier with each word. "I was a Navy combat medic, cross-attached to the joint unit operating south of your team. Our convoy was redirected after the first call for casualties." Ray leaned forward. The men beside him stopped moving. Olivia explained only enough to make the truth clear. Their units had been scattered when communications failed. Danny was separated during the withdrawal and brought to a damaged position where Olivia was treating 2 other wounded men. By the time his team reached the ridge, he had already been evacuated. They had never seen the medic kneeling beside him, because Olivia left on a different aircraft hours later. The official reports connected their units but not their names. Ray stared at the pale edge of the scar visible beneath Olivia's sleeve. "Were you the medic who signed the transfer tag with only the initials OH?" Olivia nodded. One man covered his mouth. Another looked down and pressed both palms against the table. Luke slowly returned to his chair, shame beginning to replace disbelief. "We tried to find you," Ray said. "The records gave us a unit number that had already rotated out. Nobody could tell us where you went." Olivia rested her right hand over her left wrist. "I went to surgery, then rehabilitation." Ray's eyes closed briefly. When they opened, they were wet. "You said you were there," he continued. "What exactly does that mean?" Olivia looked at Danny's empty chair. "It means I was beside him for the final 40 minutes. Ray's breath caught. The question he had carried across 3 anniversaries was suddenly sitting within reach. He leaned closer, his voice breaking completely as he asked, "Please tell me the truth. Was Danny alone when he died?" "No," Olivia said. Danny was never alone. Ray's shoulders dropped, but the relief did not reach his face. He needed more than a comforting answer from a stranger. Olivia understood that. She untied her apron, folded it once, and placed it over the back of a nearby chair. The manager started toward her, then stopped when Ray moved aside and made room at the booth. There was only one open place. Danny's place. Olivia hesitated before lowering herself into it. 7 men watched her sit in the chair they had protected for 3 years, yet none objected. The untouched bourbon glass stood near her right hand. "I wasn't your team's medic," she began. "My unit was attached to the southern convoy. When the eastern position broke apart, they sent whoever was closest." Ray nodded slowly. He knew the official version. What he did not know was that the woman sitting in Danny's chair had lived inside the missing part of it. Olivia told them Danny arrived on the back of a damaged transport with 2 other wounded men. He had been struck beneath the ribs, and the bleeding could not be fully controlled in the field. She worked on him while another medic treated the driver. The evacuation aircraft had been delayed by incoming fire, then redirected to a different landing point. "They kept telling us 10 minutes, Olivia said. Then 10 became 20. Danny understood before anyone said it aloud. He looked at Olivia and asked whether she was good at lying. She told him she was terrible at it. "Good," he answered. "Then don't start now." Luke lowered his head, because that sounded exactly like him. Olivia explained that Danny remained awake almost the entire time. He knew how badly he was hurt, but he did not spend those minutes begging or asking why. He talked because silence frightened him more than death, and Olivia kept answering because she refused to let silence take the final part of his life. At first, Danny talked about ordinary things. He complained about the dust inside his boots, and said the team owed him dinner because he had won their last card game. Ray almost smiled. "He cheated," he said. Olivia looked at him. "He said you would claim that." A quiet sound moved around the table. Not quite laughter, but close. Then she began repeating the details Danny had trusted to her. He told her Chief Coleman carried peppermints in his shirt pocket because he had quit smoking without telling anyone. Ray's hand moved unconsciously toward that pocket. Danny said Ben Torres called his daughter every Sunday at exactly 7, even when he had to borrow a phone. Ben covered his eyes. He said Owen Briggs kept a folded recipe for his mother's cornbread inside his wallet, but had never managed to make it correctly. Owen whispered, "He stole that recipe from my locker." These were not facts found in a report. They were pieces of 7 lives, handed to Olivia one breath at a time. Danny had something for every man at the table. He wanted Sam Whitaker to know the money beneath the spare tire belonged to the truck repair they had argued about. He told Olivia that Isaiah Cole pretended not to pray, then prayed for everyone else when he thought they were asleep. Isaiah stared at the empty glass and quietly crossed himself. Danny told Luke to stop postponing his wedding because fear was not a good enough reason to keep Emily waiting. Luke's face folded. He and Emily had married 6 months after the mission, but Danny had never seen the photographs. Finally, Danny spoke about Ray. "He said you blamed yourself for every man who got hurt," Olivia said. Ray looked away. "He wanted me to tell you that orders didn't separate him from the unit. The attack did. He said you would try to carry that distinction like it mattered." Ray pressed his fist against his mouth. Danny had known exactly what each man would need, but he had not known whether Olivia would ever find them. For 3 years, the team had imagined those final minutes as a dark space filled with pain. Olivia gave them something different. She told them Danny had watched sunlight move across a broken wall. He had laughed once when she tore open a package with her teeth and said military training had finally taught her a useful table manner. When his breathing became harder, she held a wet cloth against his lips and kept one hand around his. "Was he afraid?" Ben asked. Olivia considered the question before answering. "Yes, but being afraid isn't the same as giving up." Danny admitted he did not want to die, and Olivia did not insult him by pretending he would not. She promised only what she could control, that she would stay, that she would tell the truth, and that someone would be touching his hand when the moment came. Ray closed his eyes. The answer he had traveled 3 years to find was finally clear. Danny had been frightened, but he had never been abandoned. Then Olivia told them why the empty chair mattered. Near the end, Danny's voice became so faint that she had to lean close enough to feel each word against her cheek. He asked whether his team still held their Tuesday dinners whenever they were all in the same place. Olivia said she did not know. "They do," Ray whispered. Danny smiled when she told him they probably would. His grip weakened around her fingers. Then he said the final 6 words Olivia had carried through every surgery and every lonely anniversary. "Tell them to save my seat." Luke began crying before she finished the sentence. Ben bowed his head. Ray placed both hands flat on the table, as though the room had shifted beneath him. Olivia looked at the plate she had set. "I couldn't find your names in the records I was allowed to see," she said. "So every year, I saved it myself." At last, the 7 men understood. She had not intruded on their tradition. She had been keeping Danny's final request alone. The story should have ended there, but Ray noticed Olivia rubbing the fingers of her left hand. "You said you went to surgery," he said. "What happened after Danny?" Olivia's eyes dropped. She told them the second casualty stopped breathing while she was still holding Danny's hand. She moved to him before the transport team had carried Danny away. Minutes later, shrapnel tore through Olivia's left shoulder and side. She wrapped herself with one hand and continued treating both wounded men until the aircraft arrived. The injury required 3 operations and 18 months of rehabilitation. When the medical board declared her permanently non-deployable, she did not appeal. "I told myself it was because my shoulder was finished," she said, "but part of me had already left that ridge with Danny." Luke looked sick with shame as he remembered accusing her of treating their grief like decoration. Olivia did not blame him. She had misjudged herself for far longer than he had. Ray pushed back from the booth and stood. For a moment, Olivia thought the truth had become too heavy, and he needed air. Instead, he reached inside his jacket and removed a small cloth bundle secured with a worn black cord. Every man at the table recognized it. Luke wiped his face and sat straighter. Ray explained that they had brought the bundle to all 3 anniversary dinners. It belonged to someone whose name they had never known, the medic identified only by 2 initials on Danny's transfer tag. They had made a promise that if they ever found that person, the bundle would finally be opened. Ray untied the cord, but kept the cloth folded in his hands. His fingers trembled as he looked at Olivia. "Danny carried this on every mission," he said. "We saved it for the person who made sure he didn't leave this world alone." Then Ray unfolded the cloth, and Olivia saw what the 7 men had been carrying for her. Inside the cloth lay a faded unit patch, with one corner worn smooth. Olivia recognized the insignia before Ray placed it in her palm. She had seen it darkened with dust on Danny's shoulder, though this spare had traveled inside his vest. "We found it with his personal gear," Ray said. "His mother asked us to keep it. The men agreed that if they found the person who stayed with Danny, the patch would belong to that person." Olivia touched the frayed stitching. For 3 years, she had carried only the memory of a dying man. Now she held something his hands had touched when he was healthy, laughing, and unaware of the ridge ahead. But Ray had not finished explaining why they brought it to every dinner. "We made another decision," he said. "Whoever received that patch received a place with us." They had never known whether Danny's medic survived. All they had were the initials OH and a transfer tag stained beyond reading. Still, they knew someone remained with him because his body was found with one hand carefully folded over the other. "We figured that person was carrying something too," Ben said. "We wanted them to know they didn't have to carry it outside the circle." Ray pointed to Olivia's chair. "That seat was Danny's. From tonight forward, it's yours whenever you want it." Olivia closed her fingers around the patch. She had expected anger and prepared for questions. She had not prepared for 7 strangers to offer her belonging. Luke tried to speak, but nothing came out. He stared at the plate he had accused Olivia of treating like decoration. "I was wrong," he said. "What I said was cruel." Olivia shook her head. "You were protecting your friend." "No, I was protecting my idea of who had the right to grieve him." He looked at her injured arm and folded apron. "I saw a waitress and decided that was the whole story." Olivia understood because she had done the same to herself, treating her current uniform as proof that the medic from the ridge no longer existed. "Danny talked about your wedding," she said. "He wanted you to get there." Luke covered his face, and Ray placed a hand on his shoulder. The youngest man at the table was no longer angry. He was finally mourning without anger to hide behind. Ray poured 8 small measures of bourbon. He filled Danny's glass last, and Olivia moved it to the center where everyone could reach it. Ray lifted his own. For Danny Alvarez. One by one, the others raised theirs. Before they drank, Ray turned to Olivia. "You should finish it." She had never spoken Danny's name in a room where anyone else knew him. Her voice failed. Then she looked at the 7 men he had described, one fading breath at a time. For Danny, he was afraid. He was brave. And he spent his final minutes making sure the people he loved would be all right. He wasn't alone then, and he isn't alone tonight. 8 glasses touched above the empty plate. For the first time in 3 years, their toast was not built around unanswered questions. Olivia told them about her own anniversary ritual. Every year, she cooked whatever simple meal she could manage after work, placed a second glass on the table, and left the chair across from her, empty. She had never known whether Danny liked bourbon, so she poured coffee because that was what she drank on the night sleep would not come. "I thought I was remembering him," she said. "But I think I was also waiting for someone to remember him with me." Ray looked around at the team. "You don't have to wait anymore." They remained at the bar until closing, eating food that had gone cold twice because nobody could stop talking. Olivia learned what Danny had been like before the ridge, his terrible singing, his habit of borrowing tools without returning them, and the enormous breakfasts he ordered after overnight missions. Slowly, the man she knew only in pain became whole. Before they left, Ray handed Olivia a photograph from his wallet. It showed Danny standing beside a weathered truck, sunlight across his face, and a wide smile beneath dark sunglasses. Olivia stared at it for a long time. She had never seen him standing. In her memories, he was always lying beneath that broken wall, his face pale and his breathing shallow. The photograph returned height, strength, and mischief to him. "Keep it," Ray said. "We have copies." Olivia placed it beside the patch in her apron pocket. Then Ray wrote a date and phone number on the back of a receipt. "Same Tuesday next year," he said. "Wherever we meet, your place will be set." Olivia looked at the 7 men waiting for an answer. "I'll be there." What none of them expected was that they would not wait a full year to see her again. Luke returned the following Tuesday with his wife Emily, and quietly introduced Olivia as the woman Danny had told him about. Ben stopped by whenever he traveled through town. Owen brought a pan of cornbread so bad that Olivia finally understood why Danny had laughed about it. Ray called once a month, sometimes to ask about her shoulder, sometimes only to tell her a memory that had surfaced. The 7 men became familiar faces at Miller's, arriving separately, but always taking time to sit at Olivia's end of the bar. Their presence did not erase what happened on the ridge. It changed who carried it. Olivia began sleeping through more nights. She opened the storage box beneath her bed and removed one photograph from her years in uniform. She did not put the uniform back on, but she stopped treating it like evidence of a life that had ended. 1 year later, 8 people gathered at the same back booth. Olivia set the table herself, but this time no one questioned the final place. Danny's glass rested in the center, while Olivia sat in the chair Ray had promised would remain hers. Behind the bar hung the photograph of Danny beside his truck, newly framed beneath a small brass plate bearing his name. Customers sometimes asked who he was. Olivia would smile and say, "A man who didn't like sitting alone." Then she would glance toward the booth where 7 brothers had made room for the woman, who carried his final 40 minutes. The table had once held an empty place for a man they lost. Now it held a permanent place for the person who brought his last words home. And every Tuesday that mattered, 7 became 8. Not because grief disappeared, but because it was finally shared. If stories about courage, remembrance, and giving people a place to belong touch your heart, subscribe and join us for the next one.